As the late afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood, Emily walked briskly along the cracked sidewalk, her school bag bouncing gently against her side. The neighborhood was usually peaceful at this hour, the kind of place where children played until dusk and neighbors exchanged friendly waves. Yet today, an unsettling stillness hung in the air, broken only by the distant rustling of leaves near the edge of the dense woods that bordered the cul-de-sac. Emily's footsteps echoed softly, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air as she made her way home. She hugged her jacket tighter, the chill biting through the fabric, and glanced nervously toward the tree line. The woods loomed like a dark wall, the thick canopy swallowing the fading light. Normally, Emily would avoid the shortcut through the trees, but today she had no choice. Her usual route was blocked by construction, and the detour forced her closer to the shadowed forest path. Unease prickled at her skin, but she pushed the feeling aside, quickening her pace. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes snapped her attention back to the present. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her from behind, silencing her scream with a rough cloth pressed against her mouth. Panic surged as she struggled, her fingers clawing at the gloves covering her captor's hands. Two figures, faces obscured by masks, dragged her swiftly toward the undergrowth. The muffled thuds of her feet against the leaf-strewn ground were swallowed by the thickening twilight. Just beyond the tree line, Navy SEAL Jake Lawson and his canine partner, Titan, were pushing through their training run. The rhythmic pounding of their boots and paws on the forest floor was a familiar cadence to Jake, a grounding beat he relied on to sharpen his senses. Recently returned from deployment, Jake had been eager to reconnect with Titan, a powerful Belgian Malinois whose instincts were unmatched. They had chosen this rugged stretch of woods for its challenging terrain, perfect for honing tracking and tactical skills. The sudden disturbance caught Titan's attention immediately. His ears pricked, nose twitching as he picked up an unfamiliar scent on the breeze. Jake slowed, scanning the dimming forest with practiced eyes. The scent was faint but unmistakable. Human, unsettled, and desperate. Titan growled low, his body tensing as he locked onto the source. Jake motioned for silence, signaling Titan to move ahead cautiously. The tension thickened as they edged forward, the trees closing around them like silent sentries. Jake's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the scene unfolding before him. Someone was in trouble, and Titan's instincts told him it was urgent. Every muscle in Jake's body tightened, the familiar surge of adrenaline sharpening his focus. The woods were no place for a struggle, especially at dusk, when shadows twisted and concealed dangers. Emily's muffled cries barely pierced the dense canopy as her captors forced her deeper into the forest. Her heart hammered against her ribs, fear threatening to choke her voice. She fought with every ounce of strength, fingers scraping bark and clawing at the dirt, desperate to break free. But the masked men were relentless, their grip unyielding. The cold cloth over her mouth smudged with tears as she gasped for air, eyes wide with terror. Jake and Titan moved like shadows themselves. Titan's paws made no sound as he closed the distance, nose to the ground, tracing the scent with unerring precision. Jake's breath was steady, controlled, his training guiding every step. His eyes darted between the trees, alert for any sign of movement. The quiet suburb with its neat lawns and friendly faces was a world away from the primal urgency that gripped him now. Time seemed to slow as the pursuit intensified. The kidnappers, sensing the presence behind them, quickened their pace, branches snapping underfoot. Emily's struggle grew weaker, exhaustion seeping into her limbs. The forest swallowed their figures, disappearing into the tangled shadows. But Titan's tracking skills were flawless, weaving through the underbrush with unwavering determination. Jake raised a hand, signaling Titan to halt momentarily. He crouched, listening intently to the faint sounds ahead, the scuffle of feet, the restrained sobs of a frightened girl. His mind cataloged possibilities, weighing the risks of a direct confrontation against stealth. The woods were a maze, an advantage to those who knew its secrets. But Jake's military experience gave him an edge. He had faced hostile terrain and worse enemies. The cold autumn air pressed in, thick with the scent of pine and earth, mingled now with the metallic tang of fear. Titan's eyes locked onto Jake's, a silent communication passing between them. They were a unit, bound by trust and training. Jake nodded imperceptibly, and Titan moved forward, low and silent, ready to flank the kidnappers. Emily's muffled pleas went unanswered as the assailants dragged her further into the forest's heart. Her vision blurred with tears, the fading light playing tricks on her senses. She clung to a fragile hope, her mind racing for an escape, for rescue. The oppressive silence of the woods pressed down, broken only by the distant, measured steps of her pursuers and the faint rustling of leaves. Jake's voice was a whisper as he called out Titan's name, urging the dog onward. Their coordinated pursuit was a dance of precision and patience. Jake's fingers brushed the grip of his sidearm, ready but reluctant to draw unless absolutely necessary. He trusted Titan to create the opening they needed. The scene was charged with urgency, the stakes impossibly high. A teenage girl, vulnerable and terrified, was trapped in the wilderness, her fate uncertain. Yet in the shadows, a protector moved with lethal grace, guided by instinct and unwavering resolve. Jake Lawson and Titan were closing in, the hunt beginning in earnest beneath the fading light of a Maplewood autumn. The quiet suburb of Maplewood was a portrait of suburban tranquility, its orderly rows of homes framed by manicured lawns and the gentle hum of everyday life. Towering maples lined the streets, their leaves turning amber and gold in the early embrace of autumn. This was a neighborhood where children's laughter echoed from playgrounds, and neighbors shared cups of coffee on front porches as the sun dipped below the horizon. Yet, just beyond the last picket fence, the woods stood as a stark contrast, dense, shadowed, and mysterious, a natural barrier that few dared to cross after dark. Jake Lawson knew this terrain intimately. A seasoned Navy SEAL, recently returned from a grueling deployment overseas, he sought solace in the familiar challenge of these woods. The rugged landscape was ideal for training, a place where he and Titan, his loyal Belgian Malinois, could push their limits. Titan was more than a dog. He was a partner finely tuned to Jake's commands, with instincts honed through countless missions. Together, they shared a bond forged in the crucible of discipline and mutual trust. As Jake navigated the uneven path, the crunch of leaves beneath his boots was a steady rhythm against the backdrop of chirping crickets and the distant call of an owl. Titan moved beside him with silent grace, his keen nose constantly probing the air. The dog's ears flicked at every sound, rustling branches, snapping twigs, the faintest whisper of movement. Jake admired Titan's vigilance. It was this alertness that had saved his life more than once in hostile territory. The crisp autumn air carried a mixture of scents: damp earth, pine needles, and the faint trace of smoke from nearby chimneys. Jake's eyes scanned the dimming woods, alert to any anomalies. The forest here was a patchwork of towering oaks and dense underbrush, with shafts of fading sunlight filtering through the canopy. It was easy to get lost among the shadows, where the natural world's quiet beauty masked unseen dangers. Meanwhile, Emily's ordeal unfolded in stark contrast to the serenity of her neighborhood. Just a few minutes earlier, she had been an ordinary teenager walking home, unaware that the peaceful streets bordered such a dark undercurrent. Her captors remained faceless threats, their masked visages blending into the forest's gloom. The cloth muffling her cries was damp with the sweat of fear. Her slender arms strained against their grip, desperate for escape, but the strength of the assailants was overwhelming. Emily's wide eyes darted through the shadows, searching for any sign of hope. The woods, once a place of childhood adventure and carefree daydreams, had transformed into a maze of terror. She remembered the stories her parents told about the dangers lurking beyond the safe boundaries of their town. The warnings about strangers, about trusting no one. Now, those tales felt all too real. Back on the training trail, Jake's thoughts briefly drifted to his own family. He had left behind a small house on the outskirts of town, where his sister kept things running while he was deployed. The quiet life of Maplewood was a stark contrast to the chaos of overseas missions. Here, the stakes felt different, but no less urgent. Protecting this community was a responsibility he took seriously, even on a routine run. Titan's sudden change in demeanor snapped Jake back to the moment. The dog's body stiffened, nose lowered to the ground as he caught a scent. Jake slowed, watching Titan's movements carefully. The bond between them was seamless, a silent language of gestures and signals developed through years of training. Titan's alertness was a message. Something was amiss. Jake crouched, eyes narrowing as he followed Titan's line of sight into the thickening woods. The fading light cast long shadows that danced among the trees, creating an eerie veil over the terrain. His military instincts kicked in, assessing the environment for threats and opportunities. He knew the importance of patience and precision in situations like this. Rushing in blindly could endanger the victim and himself. The bond between Jake and Titan was deeper than most could understand. Titan was not just a trained tracker. He was a partner who anticipated Jake's every move. His ears twitched at the faintest sounds, his muscles coiled like a spring ready to release. Jake trusted Titan implicitly, knowing that the dog's senses could detect dangers his own eyes might miss. Emily's muffled sobs cut through the stillness, a faint but unmistakable call for help. The kidnappers pressed on, their footsteps crunching over twigs and leaves, voices low and threatening. The forest seemed to close in around them, the thick foliage swallowing their figures. For Emily, each step was a struggle against despair. But beneath her fear was a flicker of determination to survive. Jake's jaw tightened as he pieced together the situation. The scent trail Titan followed was fresh, the urgency clear in the dog's pace. Jake's mind cataloged every detail: the time of day, the terrain, the potential number of assailants. His training as a SEAL had prepared him for hostile environments and covert rescues, but every mission was a test of wits and willpower. The suburban streets of Maplewood, with their neat houses and quiet sidewalks, felt worlds away from the tense wilderness where Jake and Titan now operated. But Jake knew the community's safety depended on vigilance, on individuals willing to act when others might hesitate. The woods were no longer just a backdrop for training. They were a battleground where a young girl's fate hung in the balance. As the light continued to fade, Jake adjusted his gear, preparing for the possibility of confrontation. He whispered a command to Titan, who responded with a subtle nod of his head, a signal that the dog was ready. The partnership was seamless. Jake's strategic mind and Titan's acute senses formed a formidable team. Emily's strength waned as exhaustion set in, but her spirit remained unbroken. In the depths of the forest, surrounded by shadows and danger, she clung to the hope that help was coming. The faint sound of footsteps, not belonging to her captors, stirred something deep within her. A chance to survive, to fight back. Jake's presence was a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Every second counted as he and Titan closed the distance, guided by experience and an unyielding commitment to protect. The peaceful facade of Maplewood was shattered, revealing the urgent reality beneath. The need for courage, for connection, and for a bond that could turn the tide in the heart of the woods. Emily's breath came in short, ragged gasps as the masked men dragged her deeper into the woods, their grip unyielding despite her desperate struggles. The fading light filtered through the dense canopy, casting jagged shadows that seemed to close around her like a tightening noose. Her muffled cries were swallowed by the thick underbrush, the faintest echoes lost beneath the rustling leaves and snapping twigs. Fear clung to her skin like a second layer, icy and suffocating, as she fought against the overwhelming odds. Her eyes darted frantically, searching for any sign of salvation amid the towering trees and tangled branches. The forest, once a place of childhood wonder and carefree afternoons, had transformed into a labyrinth of terror. Every step the kidnappers took seemed to carry her further from safety, the path twisting unpredictably beneath a canopy that blocked the last vestiges of sunlight. Her heart pounded so fiercely she feared it might burst free, her pulse a frantic drumbeat against the silence. Meanwhile, not far behind, Jake Lawson and Titan moved with deliberate stealth. Titan's nose was glued to the ground, tracing the faint scent trail with unerring precision. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, the scuffle of hurried footsteps, the faint rustling of leaves disturbed by the kidnapper's passage. Jake's eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows that stretched across the forest floor as the day slipped into dusk. His breath was steady, controlled, every muscle coiled in readiness. The urgency of the situation pressed heavily on Jake's mind. Emily was vulnerable, exposed to dangers that multiplied with every passing second. The kidnappers were desperate, their pace quickening, their voices low and harsh. Jake knew that time was running out, and the forest's tangled maze could easily swallow a girl lost and alone. Yet Titan's unerring instincts offered a beacon of hope, a lifeline threading through the darkness. As they pursued, the kidnappers' desperation became palpable. Their grip on Emily tightened, their movements more frantic, as if they sensed the invisible presence closing in behind them. Emily's muffled sobs grew weaker, the fight draining from her limbs. But beneath the exhaustion lay a flicker of defiance, an ember of hope refusing to die. She clenched her fists, fighting against the despair that threatened to consume her. Titan's pace quickened, muscles rippling beneath his sleek coat as he followed the scent with unwavering focus. Jake adjusted his footing, careful not to make a sound that might alert the kidnappers to their approach. The forest was alive with shadows and whispers, a place where a single misstep could mean disaster. Yet Jake's training guided him, every movement precise and purposeful. The kidnappers veered off the main trail, plunging deeper into a thicket where the underbrush grew thick and unforgiving. Branches scraped against Jake's jacket as he pushed forward, Titan close at his side. The scent grew stronger, more urgent, as if Emily's presence was a beacon in the oppressive gloom. Jake's mind raced through possible scenarios: hostile confrontation, a stealthy rescue, the delicate balance of timing and force. Emily's vision blurred with tears as she struggled to remain conscious, her limbs heavy with fatigue and fear. The cloth muffling her screams was damp and rough against her skin. Every breath was a battle, every heartbeat a prayer. She tried to summon the strength to break free, to run, to scream for help. But the kidnappers' grip was relentless, their intent clear and chilling. Suddenly, Titan's low growl shattered the tense quiet, a warning that the moment was near. Jake froze, hand instinctively moving to the grip of his sidearm but holding back, trusting his partner's lead. The dog's eyes locked onto the kidnapper's position, muscles coiled and ready to spring. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline flooding his veins. The kidnappers, sensing the shift in the forest's atmosphere, exchanged hurried glances, their movements jagged and panicked. They tightened their hold on Emily, their faces hidden but voices sharp with urgency. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the tension palpable and electric. Jake signaled Titan to circle wide, aiming to flank the assailants without drawing their full attention. The dog melted into the shadows, silent and swift, a ghost moving through the undergrowth. Jake advanced cautiously, every sense alert to the slightest sound or movement. The stakes were impossibly high. One wrong move could cost Emily her life. Emily's muffled sobs echoed faintly as she was dragged across roots and fallen leaves, her body weak but spirit unbroken. She caught a glimpse of a narrow clearing ahead, a small patch of open sky visible through the trees. It was a sliver of hope, a fragile beacon in the encroaching darkness. She vowed silently to hold on, to survive. Jake's breath caught as he closed the distance, the kidnappers' voices now mere whispers carried on the wind. Titan's bark broke the silence like a thunderclap, a fierce, controlled sound designed to disorient and distract. The dog lunged forward, teeth bared, drawing the kidnappers' attention and forcing them to split their focus. In the chaos, Jake surged ahead, his training taking over. He moved with precision, disarming one assailant with a swift motion, the man stumbling back with a grunt. Another attacker swung wildly, but Titan intercepted with a snap of jaws, forcing the man to release Emily's arm. Jake reached for her, fingers brushing against her trembling shoulder as he pulled her to safety. Emily collapsed into his arms, tears streaming freely now as relief and exhaustion overwhelmed her. Jake's voice was calm, steady, a lifeline in the storm of her emotions. Titan stood guard, growling low as the remaining kidnappers reeled from the sudden assault. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension easing for a moment as rescue took hold. But the danger was far from over. The kidnappers, though stunned, were not defeated. Their eyes burned with fury and desperation, and Jake knew the confrontation was only beginning. Yet in this moment, the fragile thread of hope had been found. A chance to turn the tide and bring Emily back from the shadows. Jake pressed his back against the rough bark of an ancient oak as the forest around him seemed to hold its breath. Titan crouched low beside him, muscles taut, eyes sharp and scanning the shadowed underbrush. The kidnappers had been startled but not yet subdued. Their desperate energy thrummed through the thick air like a live wire. Jake's mind raced, calculating angles, assessing threats, and crafting a plan that would minimize risk to Emily, while maximizing their chances of success. He gave Titan a subtle nod, signaling the dog to move silently to the right flank. The Belgian Malinois slipped away with the grace of a shadow, melting into the dense foliage without a sound. Jake watched Titan disappear, trusting the dog's instincts implicitly. This was no ordinary training exercise. Every move could mean the difference between life and death. Jake's voice was barely a whisper as he spoke into his comm unit clipped to his vest. Setting perimeter, flanking right, hold position. The faint crackle of static was the only reply, but it was enough. Years of military discipline had ingrained in him the need for coordinated action, even when alone. He adjusted his grip on his tactical knife, the cold steel a reassuring weight against his palm. The kidnappers were clustered near a small clearing, their attention divided between Emily and the forest's shifting shadows. Jake's vantage point offered a partial view, enough to see their movements but not their faces. The low light filtered through the canopy, casting fragmented patterns across the uneven ground. The men's breaths came in ragged bursts, their nerves frayed, aware that the hunter was now the hunted. Jake's heart pounded steadily, his breathing controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. His training kicked in, guiding every decision with precision honed through countless missions. Time was a luxury he didn't have. Emily's safety depended on swift, calculated action. As Titans circled the right flank, Jake began to position himself for the intercept. Using the natural cover of ferns and twisted roots, he moved silently, each step measured to avoid snapping twigs or stirring leaves. The forest seemed alive with tension, the silence punctuated only by distant bird calls and the soft rustle of the wind. Every sense was alert, every fiber of his being focused on the task at hand. He glimpsed Emily, her face pale but resolute, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. The kidnapper's grip on her was tight but faltering. Titan's presence was already unsettling them. Jake knew that the dog's controlled aggression would buy the crucial seconds needed to execute his plan. Suddenly, a twig snapped beneath Jake's boot, the sharp sound slicing through the stillness like a gunshot. Heads turned, eyes searching the shadows. Jake froze, heart leaping, but Titan's growl answered the call before the kidnappers could react fully. The dog emerged from the underbrush with a fierce bark, charging the nearest assailant with lethal intent. Chaos erupted. Jake surged forward, blade flashing as he disarmed one attacker with a swift, practiced motion. The man stumbled backward, clutching his wrist in pain. Another lunged toward Emily, but Titan intercepted, teeth snapping inches from a desperate hand. The forest floor became a blur of movement, grunts, shouts, and the scuffle of feet on leaves. Amid the turmoil, Jake grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her toward a safer spot behind a large fallen log. His voice was steady, reassuring. "You're safe now. Stay close." Emily's breath was shaky, but she nodded, clinging to him as the battle raged around them. Titan kept pressure on the kidnappers, his growls low and threatening, a constant reminder of the consequences of aggression. Jake's tactical mind guided his every move. He used the terrain to his advantage, maneuvering the attackers into positions where he could control the fight. One by one, the kidnappers were subdued, disarmed, restrained, or driven back by Titan's relentless defense. The forest, once a place of menace, now echoed with the sounds of struggle and determination. Jake's years of training shone through in his precise, calculated actions. A dance of survival played out beneath the canopy of ancient trees. As the last assailant fell into submission, Jake quickly secured the area, binding their hands with zip ties from his pack. Titan circled the perimeter, alert for any sign of additional threats. The tension slowly eased, replaced by a cautious calm. Jake crouched beside Emily, checking her for injuries. Her eyes met his, gratitude mingling with lingering fear. He offered a reassuring smile, his voice gentle but firm. "You're going to be okay. Help is on the way." The forest around them seemed to breathe a quiet sigh of relief as Jake radioed for backup, his voice calm and authoritative. The rescue was far from over, but the immediate danger had passed. Titan settled beside them, his head resting lightly against Jake's knee, a silent vow of protection. In the heart of the woods, beneath the fading light, a bond of trust and courage had prevailed. Jake's tactical precision and Titan's keen senses had turned the tide, setting the stage for the next chapter in their fight to bring justice and safety to a frightened girl caught in the shadows. The forest was still, save for the heavy breaths and the low growls that rose from Titan as he stood vigilant between Jake and the subdued kidnappers. Emily sat huddled behind a fallen log, trembling but safe, her wide eyes flickering with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The shadows that had once cloaked her terror now seemed to recede, replaced by the steady presence of her rescuers. Jake's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the assailants, who remained bound and disarmed on the leaf-strewn ground. "You're done. Help is on the way." His words carried the weight of authority, tempered by the experience of a man who had faced far worse and lived to fight another day. The kidnappers exchanged wary glances, their resolve broken by the sudden, precise assault that had turned the tide. Titan remained alert, his posture protective but controlled. The dog's keen senses still scanned the surrounding woods for any hint of additional threats. Jake reached down, running a steadying hand along Titan's flank, a silent acknowledgement of the dog's unwavering loyalty and courage. This was more than a partnership. It was a bond forged in the crucible of trust and shared purpose. Turning to Emily, Jake knelt beside her, his gaze softening with concern. "You're safe now," he assured her gently. "Can you tell me your name?" Emily's voice was barely audible, a fragile thread woven with exhaustion. "Emily." Jake nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "I'm Jake. This is Titan. We're here to get you home." His words were a lifeline, anchoring her to a reality where safety was no longer a distant hope, but an imminent certainty. Emily's eyes flicked toward the bound kidnappers, a shiver running through her. Why? Why did they take me? Jake's expression darkened, the grim knowledge settling in. That's what we're going to find out. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. He reached into his pack and produced a clean water bottle, pressing it gently to her lips. She drank eagerly, the cool liquid soothing the dryness that had settled in her throat. The forest around them seemed to exhale, the tension easing as the minutes stretched. Jake's mind raced ahead, calling for backup, preparing for the arrival of law enforcement, and planning the next steps. But in this moment, his focus remained on Emily, on the fragile thread of calm he could offer. Suddenly, the distant sound of sirens pierced the quiet, a beacon of hope threading through the trees. Emily's eyes widened, and a tremor of relief coursed through her body. Jake stood, signaling Titan to heel as he moved to a vantage point to guide the approaching responders. The forest, once a place of fear and uncertainty, was now a stage for rescue and renewal. As the first officers arrived, their faces a mixture of determination and concern, Jake briefed them swiftly. Suspects are secured. Victim is with me. We need medical and psychological support on site. His voice carried the authority of experience, cutting through the urgency with clarity. Emily was gently escorted from the clearing, wrapped in a warm blanket offered by a paramedic. Her steps were unsteady, but the presence of caring hands steadied her. Jake watched silently, the weight of the ordeal settling over him. The forest had witnessed a nightmare, but now it bore witness to a beginning, a fragile, hopeful start to healing. Detectives arrived soon after, their questions pointed and professional. Emily answered as best she could, her voice trembling but resolute. Jake stood nearby, a silent sentinel, ready to support her through the difficult process ahead. The kidnappers were loaded into patrol cars, their expressions a mix of defeat and menace. As the night deepened, the clearing emptied, the officers moving efficiently through their duties. Jake remained with Emily until she was safely transported to a nearby hospital for evaluation and care. Titan, ever vigilant, stayed by Jake's side, the dog's steady presence a balm to the tension that lingered. Jake reflected on the rescue, the precision, the risks, the fragile thread of hope that had been enough to save a life. Emily's courage, though overshadowed by fear, had not been extinguished. And as dawn approached, the promise of a new day whispered through the trees, carrying with it the enduring strength of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog. The woods had witnessed a rescue born of strategy and instinct, of heart and grit. But the story was far from over. For now, there was safety, and with it, the first steps toward justice. At the edge of the clearing, the soft glow of emergency vehicle lights flickered against the dense trees, casting fractured patterns of red and blue across the forest floor. Emily sat wrapped in a warm blanket, her small frame shivering despite the layers of fabric. Her wide eyes darted nervously as paramedics attended to her, checking for injuries and offering sips of water. The cool night air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, but also tinged with the sterile sharpness of antiseptic and the distant hum of radios. Jake stood nearby, his posture relaxed but vigilant, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. The adrenaline that had fueled him moments before was ebbing, replaced by a quiet determination to ensure the girl's safety and recovery. Titan sat calmly by his side, head tilted slightly, sensing the shift from immediate danger to cautious relief. Emily's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. The trauma of her ordeal clung to her like a shadow, dark and persistent. Though she was physically unharmed, the emotional toll was evident. The trembling hands, the haunted look in her eyes, the way she flinched at sudden noises. Jake knelt beside her, offering a steadying hand on her shoulder. His voice was soft, patient. "You're safe now, Emily. We're going to take care of you." The paramedics nodded in agreement, preparing to transport her to the nearby hospital for further evaluation. But before they could move, a stern voice cut through the calm. Detective Laura Mitchell stepped into the clearing, her expression sharp and professional. Her badge gleamed in the flashlight's beam as she approached Jake and the emergency team. "Who's in charge here?" she asked, her tone clipped but not unkind. Jake straightened, meeting her gaze with measured calm. "I'm Jake Lawson. Found the victim, secured the suspects. We're waiting for medical support to clear her." Mitchell's eyes narrowed slightly as she scanned the scene, the bound kidnappers, the anxious girl, the disciplined handler and his dog. "Good work," she said, though her tone held an edge of skepticism. "We'll need a full report once Emily's stable." Emily's eyes flicked toward the detective, uncertainty flickering across her face. Jake sensed the tension and stepped in. "Emily needs time. This isn't just about facts and statements, it's about her well-being." Mitchell nodded slowly, but made a note on her clipboard. "Of course. But we'll need to understand what happened, who these men are, why they took her." As the paramedics prepared Emily for transport, Jake remained close, offering quiet reassurance. Emily's voice was barely a whisper as she tried to explain, her words halting and fragmented. They said I knew things I shouldn't tell. They wanted me to be quiet." Jake's jaw tightened, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align. He looked toward the restrained kidnappers, their faces obscured by masks, but their intent clear. This was no random act. Emily had been targeted for a reason. Detective Mitchell observed the exchange, her expression hardening. Sounds like this is bigger than a simple abduction. Jake's mind raced as he considered the implications. His military contacts, the training he'd received in intelligence gathering, and the instincts that had kept him alive in hostile environments now converged. Emily was a witness, a key to uncovering a larger threat lurking beneath the surface of their quiet town. The night grew deeper, the forest around them settling into an uneasy silence, broken only by the murmurs of officers coordinating next steps. Jake's focus remained on Emily, fragile but resilient, and the need to protect her as the investigation unfolded. As Emily was gently lifted into the ambulance, her gaze met Jake's one last time. In that fleeting moment, a silent promise passed between them. She would not face this alone. Jake watched as the vehicle disappeared into the night, lights fading into the distance. Titan sat by his side, alert and ready. The rescue was only the beginning. The shadows that had taken Emily still lingered, and Jake knew the fight to uncover the truth was just beginning. The forest, once a place of terror, now held the first echoes of hope. Fragile, tentative, but undeniable. And in the quiet aftermath, Jake prepared to stand guard, a sentinel against the darkness, ready to protect those who could not protect themselves. In the days following the harrowing rescue, the quiet streets of Maplewood seemed to pulse with a new undercurrent, a mix of whispered fears and cautious hope. Emily's ordeal had unsettled the community, revealing cracks beneath the neighborhood's peaceful veneer. Meanwhile, Jake Lawson found himself drawn deeper into a web of secrets that stretched far beyond the wooded edge where the abduction had taken place. Jake sat in the modest conference room of the local police station, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead mingling with the low murmur of distant conversations. Across the table, Detective Laura Mitchell shuffled through a stack of files, her sharp eyes scanning the details Emily had shared in her tentative statements. The girl's voice had been fragile but resolute, hinting at shadows darker than a simple kidnapping. She mentioned a criminal ring, Mitchell said, breaking the silence. People who wanted her silenced because she witnessed something big. Jake nodded, fingers tapping lightly on the polished wood. That fits with what I suspected. The kidnappers were organized, coordinated. This wasn't random. Someone wanted her quiet because she knew too much. Mitchell's brow furrowed as she looked up. We've caught a few low-level players, but the real masterminds are still out there. Emily's information could be the key to unraveling the whole operation. Jake leaned back, eyes narrowing as he considered the implications. His military background had taught him to recognize patterns, to connect dots others might miss. The quiet suburban town was harboring a network of criminals, and Emily's abduction was just the tip of the iceberg. Any leads on what kind of operation we're dealing with? Jake asked. Mitchell sighed. Human trafficking, using the port nearby as a hub. Emily stumbled onto something they didn't want anyone to see. The words hung heavy in the air, painting a grim picture of exploitation and danger lurking beneath the town's calm surface. Jake felt a surge of determination. Protecting Emily was no longer enough. Stopping the ring was imperative. After the meeting, Jake returned home, the familiar walls of his modest house offering little comfort. Titan padded silently beside him, sensing the weight settling over his handler. Jake pulled out his phone, dialing a contact from his military days, a trusted intelligence officer who had helped him before. Jake, came the familiar voice, steady and concise. I need help, Jake said without preamble. We've got a trafficking ring operating through the port. Kidnapped a girl who witnessed something. I want to dig deeper. There was a brief pause before the reply. Understood. We'll see what we can pull from surveillance and intel. Be careful." As Jake ended the call, he felt the enormity of the task ahead. This was no longer just a rescue mission. It was a battle against a hidden enemy within his own community. The stakes were high, and the lines between friend and foe blurred. Over the next few days, Jake and Emily formed an unlikely alliance. Though still fragile from her trauma, Emily's courage began to shine through as she shared what she knew. She spoke of shadowy meetings near the docks, whispered threats, and faces she recognized from the neighborhood. People who wore masks of normalcy by day, but hid sinister lives after dark. Jake listened intently, his tactical mind cataloging every detail, every clue. Titan remained by Emily's side, a silent guardian offering comfort and protection. Their bond grew stronger, a beacon of hope amid the darkness. Together, Jake and Emily began piecing together the puzzle, their trust in each other deepening with every whispered conversation and cautious step. They knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, but neither was willing to back down. In the quiet moments between investigations, Jake reflected on the fragile resilience of those caught in the crossfire. Emily's bravery inspired him, reminding him why he fought to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting long shadows across the town, Jake prepared for what lay ahead. The battle to dismantle the trafficking ring was just beginning, and with Emily's help, he was determined to shine a light into the darkest corners of their community. The dim glow of Jake's laptop screen illuminated the cluttered room as he and Emily pored over maps, photographs, and notes scattered across the table. The late-night hours had stretched on, but fatigue was a distant concern compared to the urgency driving their efforts. Titan lay quietly nearby, occasionally lifting his head to survey the room, ever vigilant even in moments of calm. The neighborhood Jake called home had transformed from a backdrop of routine to a battleground layered with secrets. The criminal ring they were chasing operated with chilling efficiency, weaving through the town's fabric like a shadow. Every lead they uncovered chipped away at the veil of silence, revealing a network of corruption and exploitation that stretched to the port's docks. Emily's voice was steady but cautious as she recounted details she had gathered since her rescue. "There's a warehouse near the East Pier," she said, tracing a finger along the map's edge. "That's where they bring the shipments and the people." Jake nodded, his eyes sharp as he absorbed her words. "That fits with the intel. Surveillance shows increased activity there at night. Trucks coming and going, people moving in and out under cover of darkness." They worked in tandem, combining Emily's first-hand knowledge with Jake's tactical expertise. Titan's nose twitched as the dog caught a faint scent lingering near the open window, something metallic, sharp, and faintly acrid. Jake glanced down, giving Titan a reassuring pat. The dog's presence was a reminder of the stakes. Every small clue mattered. The plan taking shape was meticulous. Jake and Emily would collaborate with law enforcement to set up covert surveillance on the warehouse, gathering evidence without alerting the criminals. Titan's tracking skills would be crucial in monitoring movement and detecting any attempts to escape or communicate covertly. "We need to be careful," Jake warned, his voice low but firm. "They're dangerous and desperate. One wrong move, and this could go sideways." Emily nodded, determination hardening her features. The trauma she had endured had forged a resilience that surprised even Jake. "I want to help," she said quietly. "I can recognize some of the people, and maybe even catch them off guard." Jake smiled, a rare warmth breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "You're braver than you know." Over the next several days, Jake coordinated with Detective Mitchell and a select team to install hidden cameras and monitor the warehouse. Nights were spent watching grainy footage, piecing together patterns of movement and timing. Titan's acute senses complemented the technology, his trained nose detecting scents and movements that escaped electronic eyes. The tension was tangible. Every shadow on the screen, every flicker of activity, was a potential breakthrough or a threat. Emily's input was invaluable. She identified faces and behaviors that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Her willingness to confront her fears was a testament to her growing strength. One evening, as the group reviewed footage, a convoy of black vans pulled into the warehouse lot. Figures emerged swiftly, unloading crates and guiding individuals into the building. Jake's pulse quickened. This was the moment they had been waiting for. "Prepare for the sting," Jake instructed, voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. "We move in at first light." The plan was precise. Law enforcement would surround the warehouse, cutting off escape routes, while Jake and Titan would lead the entry team, using stealth and speed to secure hostages and apprehend suspects. Emily would remain safely behind the lines, ready to assist with identification and intelligence. As dawn approached, the team gathered in the shadows near the warehouse, the cold morning air sharp against their skin. Jake adjusted his gear, Titan by his side, muscles coiled and ready. The silence was broken only by whispered commands and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Jake's mind raced through contingencies. The criminals were armed and dangerous, and the environment unpredictable. Yet the stakes, lives hanging in the balance, fueled his resolve. With a final nod, the operation commenced. Jake and his team moved with coordinated precision, slipping through the perimeter and into the belly of the warehouse. Titan led the charge, his bark a signal that shattered the quiet and sent the criminals into disarray. Shouts echoed through the cavernous space as law enforcement secured exits and began detaining suspects. Jake moved swiftly, guiding frightened captives to safety while neutralizing threats with calculated efficiency. Emily's voice crackled over the comms, providing real-time intel that proved invaluable. The confrontation was intense but brief. The element of surprise, combined with thorough preparation, tipped the scales. By the time the sun crested the horizon, the warehouse was secured, the trafficking ring's operation dismantled. As officers processed the scene, Jake knelt beside a trembling woman recently freed from captivity. Titan lay his head gently on Jake's knee, a silent witness to the rescue's impact. Back outside, Emily exhaled deeply, tears of relief mingling with exhaustion. Jake approached, offering quiet praise. "You did good," he said simply. Emily managed a weary smile. "We did good." The operation marked a turning point, a triumph born of courage, trust, and relentless determination. Yet, beneath the victory lay the sobering reality of the work ahead. Healing, justice, and the ongoing fight to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the morning light bathed Maplewood in a new glow, Jake, Emily, and Titan stood together, bound by the trials they had faced and the promise of a safer tomorrow. The night cloaked the dense forest surrounding Maplewood in near total darkness, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of flashlights and the distant sweep of patrol car beams. Jake Lawson crouched behind a thick stand of pines, Titan at his side, muscles coiled and senses sharp. The air was heavy with anticipation, a charged silence that stretched taut, ready to snap into action at a moment's notice. The operation was on the brink of its climax. Months of meticulous planning, surveillance, and intelligence gathering had led to this exact moment. The dismantling of a ruthless criminal ring that had preyed on the vulnerable through the port's shadowy warehouses. Tonight, Jake, Titan, and the coordinated law enforcement team prepared to strike with precision and force. In the dim light, Jake studied the layout of the warehouse compound. A sprawling maze of shipping containers, loading docks, and dimly lit corridors. The faint murmur of voices emanated from within, punctuated by the occasional clatter of crates and hurried footsteps. The captives, including those rescued from trafficking, were held somewhere inside, their freedom hanging in a delicate balance. Jake's grip tightened on his radio as he whispered to the team, "Positions locked. Wait for my signal." Titan's ears twitched, nostrils flaring as he picked up scents imperceptible to human senses. The dog's steady breathing was a reassuring presence, a living compass guiding Jake through the impending storm. Years of joint training had forged an unspoken language between them. In moments like this, it proved invaluable. Suddenly, a rustle echoed nearby, a subtle warning that the criminals were stirring. Jake's eyes sharpened, scanning the shadows for movement. His heart pounded steadily, adrenaline sharpening every sense without clouding judgment. 3 minutes, came the low voice of Detective Mitchell over the comms, steady and resolute. Jake nodded to himself. The plan was clear. Simultaneous entry points would isolate the criminals, prevent escape, and ensure the safety of the captives. Titan would lead the breach team, using tactical aggression to disrupt and disorient the assailants. Jake's role was to coordinate the assault, neutralize threats, and secure the hostages. As the clock edged closer, Jake took a final breath, centering himself amidst the tension. He glanced at Titan, whose focused gaze mirrored his own determination. "Now," Jake commanded. The silence shattered with the sharp bark of a Titan, a signal that cascaded into a symphony of action. Flashlights pierced the darkness as teams surged forward, breaching doors and cutting off exits. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Shouts, scuffling footsteps, and the harsh commands of law enforcement filled the air. Jake moved swiftly through the maze of crates and containers, his senses attuned to the dangers lurking in every shadow. Titan darted ahead, teeth bared and growling, forcing assailants into defensive postures. The criminals, caught off guard, scrambled to regroup, but the precision of the assault left little room for resistance. In one corridor, Jake spotted a group of captives huddled against a wall, fear etched into their faces. "This way," he called, motioning for them to follow. Titan nudged the nearest captive protectively, offering a silent reassurance. Gunfire echoed in the distance, a stark reminder of the stakes. Jake pressed on, disarming an assailant with a swift move, the man collapsing with a grunt. Titan intercepted another attacker, jaws snapping inches from a raised weapon, forcing surrender. The operation unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance, each step choreographed for maximum effectiveness. Yet unpredictability lingered. The criminal's desperation fueled fierce resistance. Jake remained calm, adapting swiftly to changes, his military training guiding his every move. As the final pockets of resistance crumbled, officers secured the captives and began processing the detained criminals. The warehouse, once a den of cruelty and fear, now echoed with the subdued murmurs of relief and the steady hum of radio chatter. Jake sank briefly against a crate, breathing heavily but victorious. Titan settled beside him, head resting on Jake's knee, a silent partner in triumph and fatigue. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the weary faces of those who had fought through the night. Emily stood nearby, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and hope. Jake approached, offering a nod of respect. "You did good," he said quietly. Emily smiled faintly, the weight of the ordeal still evident, but her spirit unbroken. "We all did," As law enforcement began the painstaking process of evidence collection and victim support, Jake allowed himself a moment to reflect. This victory was not just the end of a mission, but the beginning of healing for many lives shattered by darkness. Titan licked Jake's hand, a reminder of the bond that had carried them through the ordeal. Together, they had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, and emerged stronger. The sun rose higher, bathing Maplewood in warm light. The shadows that had threatened the town were pushed back, but Jake knew the fight against such evil was ongoing. For now, justice had prevailed, and hope had been restored. Amidst the quiet aftermath, Jake and Titan stood ready, watchful guardians prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Weeks had passed since the final confrontation at the warehouse, yet the echoes of that night lingered in the quiet moments Jake Lawson found himself reflecting on the journey. The crisp morning air of Maplewood carried a gentle breeze that rustled through the trees lining the suburban streets, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had once gripped the town. Life was slowly returning to its rhythm. But for Emily, Jake, and Titan, the path ahead was still unfolding. Emily sat in a sunlit room at the community center, the soft hum of a therapist's voice blending with the distant sounds of children playing outside. She traced patterns on the worn fabric of her sleeve, her eyes distant but slowly opening to the possibility of healing. The trauma she endured had left invisible scars, but each session brought her closer to reclaiming strength and hope. Jake had been a steady presence throughout, offering support beyond the role of rescuer, a friend who understood the weight of survival. Jake stood just outside the room, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, Titan lying patiently at his feet. The dog's steady breathing was a comforting rhythm, a reminder of the bond that had carried them through darkness. Jake's gaze shifted to the window, watching sunlight dance on the leaves, a symbol of renewal. Their connection, forged in the crucible of crisis, had deepened into something unspoken, yet profound. Emily's courage inspired Jake, while his unwavering loyalty provided her a foundation to rebuild. Together, they navigated the fragile terrain between past pain and future promise. One afternoon, as the therapy session concluded, Emily stepped out into the hallway, her posture steadier, a faint smile touching her lips. Jake greeted her with a nod, his expression warm but reserved. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Better," she replied. "Slowly, but I'm ready to move forward." Jake's smile deepened. That's all anyone can ask for. Over the following weeks, their bond grew through shared moments. Quiet walks through the neighborhood park, conversations over coffee, and the simple comfort of companionship. Titan remained a constant, his presence a silent guardian and source of joy. Emily learned to trust again, each step forward a testament to resilience. Jake reflected on the journey, not just the rescue and the fight against the trafficking ring, but the healing that followed. He understood the power of loyalty, courage, and unwavering support in overcoming adversity. The scars would remain, but so would the strength to face whatever came next. As spring blossomed over Maplewood, Jake and Emily found solace in the small victories. A laugh shared, a fear confronted, a day lived without shadows. Their story was one of survival and renewal, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could take root and grow. One afternoon, beneath the blooming dogwoods, Jake and Emily sat on a bench, Titan resting at their feet. The sun warmed their faces as they shared a quiet moment, the world around them alive with possibility. Emily turned to Jake, her eyes bright with newfound confidence. "Thank you for everything." Jake reached out, a gentle touch on her hand. "No, thank you. For your strength, for trusting me." In that moment, Words were unnecessary. Their connection spoke volumes, a bond forged through hardship, tempered by faith and loyalty. The story of Emily, Jake, and Titan was far from over, but the path ahead was illuminated by hope. Together, they faced the future with courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond that had seen them through the darkest nights. And as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across Maplewood, their journey continued, one step at a time, toward healing, justice, and the promise of new beginnings.